Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. Okay, so what we're here to talk about is payroll entries not transferring to accounting, okay? And, I'm constantly being asked, for ideas and topics for webinar events, and this was one of the ones that I had suggested because we just see this question coming up in Church Windows support a lot. And so I just, when we're hearing a lot of questions from the same question coming in, same support calls coming in from users and customers, sometimes that topic can become really good fodder for for our for webinars. And this was a particularly good one because we still, even now, are getting this, 18 months or more after this new payroll was released. We're still getting this question a lot. And so I said, let's try to see if we can get something out here for folks that I think will help try to maybe further some understanding as to why payroll is not transferring into accounting. And so let's look at that. So when we go into payroll, there are definitely a couple of really very clear specific reasons why payroll may not transfer into accounting. And we're going to look at a couple of those. There's really about two, and three possibly, but mostly just two. And so the first thing that we're going to look at is when we log into payroll. If we have something that's incomplete, we're going to get questions like this, dialog boxes like this, that are opening when we get into payroll. There are checks waiting to print. Open print checks, okay? And I work with folks when I'm logging in or either on the phone, and they constantly just click no through this question, okay? This dialog box, okay? But I am going to click no through it this time because every time I close out and log back into a payroll again, it is going to pop up with this question or these questions until the problem is dealt with, okay? So, but just for the purposes of our webinar, I'm going to click no on this, because we're going to get another dialog box that now pops up and says there are unposted accounting transfers, open transfer to accounting, okay? Folks, the reason why I click no through these is because when you get these messages, when you get these messages as they're opening or as you're opening payroll, it's really important that you pay attention to them because they're basically payroll issues that are undealt with. Okay, for whatever reason, all right, whether the checks had not been printed or the check numbers had not been assigned properly or the payroll had not been transferred into accounting, for whatever reason, these are dialog boxes you need to pay attention to, okay? That's all I wanted to say no to that for, was because these dialog boxes and these messages are here for a reason, and you need to pay attention to them, okay? Because you can't just kind of pretend they don't exist, because they're going to continue to come up in perpetuity, and they could be an indicator that there's a bigger problem in play for you, okay? So let's say yes to opening our transfer to accounting window here, okay? And we're going to see here that we've got, right here, you got our year 2024, we've got transfer dates, and it's a menu. So when we click the down arrow, we notice we've got two different dates here. April 22nd and April 30th. Yeah, April 30th. It's an advance pay. Pay period ended today. I calculated it for the end of the month, and these are not transferred into accounting, okay? So first, when we go down, we're going to look at April 30th here, okay? I've got my employee John Doe here who I calculated to pay payroll for. When I try to click transfer into accounting, notice it now pops up with another dialog box that says all accounts must be filled in to transfer. Okay, so I click OK on that. Sure enough, I've got a red field here under the debit side that's saying there's an account that the software needs in order to complete the transfer into accounting that it does not have. Okay, so what that means is I need to populate this, and when I steer my focus all the way over here to the right, I can clearly see that it is the employer or church's match for the Social Security and Medicare FICA. Okay, So that is the account that needs to be populated. So I can do this one of two ways, okay? I can click in here and I can find the FICA account that I'm looking for, okay? Where is it now? Church portion of FICA, but I'm not going to choose that there. What this does is this just simply allows me to complete the transfer into accounting right now, but it doesn't address the bigger problem, which is that the employee doesn't have this expense account linked. So every time I calculate a payroll for John and I attempt to transfer it into accounting, it's going to pop up with this same problem every time. So I want to fix that. So we're going to close out of here and we're going to go into employees, contractors, and it takes a few seconds here, and I'm going to find John Doe, and I'm going to go right here to the pay rates and hours, and sure enough, right down here in the bottom right under employers FICA Medicare expense account, I need to populate that account, okay? Church portion of FICA Medicare. Now when I click off that, I can save it, okay? And now when I go back to my transfer to accounting and I find April 30th, sure enough, there's the account. It's now populated, and I should now be able to complete the transfer into accounting, okay? Okay, no red field. Nothing's barking at me telling me that the payroll can't be transferred due to the missing accounts. I can now proceed with the transfer into accounting and click yes to this, okay? So that payroll is now dealt with, all right? So that, again, is problem number one. This isn't the main one that we've been seeing lately, but that's one of the ones that if you've got an employee that is not properly linked, it's not going to make the process of transferring it into accounting easy for you. You're going to have to constantly be choosing the account that's missing, whether it's the debit expense or the credit liabilities for the taxes or the checking account, whatever's missing. What that means is you've got to go into the employee file, link those missing accounts so the problem doesn't perpetuate, okay? And the reason why this is also important is because if you're having to select the account each and every time, there's the possibility that you could choose the wrong account at one point, and then you've transferred payroll into a wrong account or out of, or debiting an improper account, okay? So when you set those accounts in their employee file, you're ensuring that the software is finding the same accounts each and every time. Okay? All right. So that is one of the reasons why payroll doesn't get transferred into accounting. That usually occurs a lot with new employees that have been added to the database. Okay? Now let's go back and look at April 22nd. All right. So when I'm looking at my payroll here for 4/22 last week, or earlier this week, I see Larry, my senior pastor, and Jerry. Well, what I know to be true about this is these are my two direct deposit employees, okay? I know that because I know my database that well. My regular employees who have received checks are not in this list. So I may be getting onto something now or onto something with regards to why the payroll is missing those employees. Sure, I could go ahead and transfer these too, but I'm really more curious as to why my other 5 or 6 employees that receive checks are not here, okay? So what that means is we're going to now go back per the other dialog box. Again, now when we close out a payroll and relaunch it, now it's going to pop up and it's going to say there are checks waiting to print, open print checks. So I'm going to click yes on that. If I just say no, I can still go to print checks to get to it, but we're going to click yes. Okay. So here it's opening up check printing. Okay. If I were to click no on that and go to, we're going to say no to that, and we're going to go to print checks. Here I'm going to choose first run checks. Not because the stubs aren't the ones that are the problem. The ones that are these are first run checks. So I'm going to choose that. And folks, you've got to look at the check run and the pay date that's right here. Again, like we've seen elsewhere, it's a menu. If I had more than one pay date, okay, that was missing checks or did not have checks printed, it would appear in this list. Okay, but as it is, it's only my 4/22, and I will virtually guarantee you that this is my other 5 or 6 employees, 7 employees here, and there they are. Okay, but I have checks in hand for these employees. So what gives? So that's a question. So what I want to make sure of is I want to make sure I'm not dealing with a duplicate payroll. All right. So we're going to cancel out of this. So we're going to go up to payroll here in the upper left corner, and then I'm going to go right across the top center to void individual pay. This is only going to show me people that receive checks, okay, employees that receive checks. My direct deposit employees can be found here under direct deposit EFT, but I'm more curious about those that are receiving checks. So I'm going to go to void individual pay, and it takes a minute to load it. But sure enough, down here for 422, here are my 6 employees, okay, and there are no check numbers. But again, what I was really here for is to look at is because I've got physical checks in hand that I presented to these employees. So why is this here? Well, I wanted to make sure there was no duplicate. There wasn't a listing for two records for each employee on 422. That would imply then that I had posted the pay twice. Software will permit me to do that. It'll attempt to warn me when I've got a pay calculated, but it won't prevent me from doing it, okay? But if there were a duplicate, I would check the one set that I'm wanting to get rid of and click void in the upper right, and then I'd be back to one set, one payroll for each employee correctly for 422. Maybe with check numbers, maybe without, okay? But what we can say with complete certainty here is, and this, again, it's important to understand, we cannot transfer payroll to accounting that does not have check numbers assigned. Now, again, direct deposit's not in play regarding that. There are no check numbers, okay? But if your employees receive checks, they have to be told that the check numbers are properly assigned, okay? How's it going to appear in my bank reconciliation if there's no check number there, okay? And they're not direct deposit employees. So I've got to get these numbers assigned. And this now comes back to the crux of the problem that we're dealing with when users are calling us with regards to their check numbers not being assigned. So if I now go back to print checks, first run checks, okay, and I'm choosing 422, and I go to next. Imagine this is the actual process where you are printing your checks for your employees in real time, okay? Calculating the payroll, step 1, I go to next, I then go to check printing. Similarly, it pops up and asks me to enter my starting check number. So I enter my starting check number. It now, notice it auto sequences the check numbers. So I go down the list and I go, yep, those are my checks. They're in order. They're in my printer. And I go to next. Here I am at my regular check layout and printing screen. Okay. Well, if I've already printed these checks, I don't need to print the actual physical check stock, okay? All right, so I can't encourage you enough, folks. Look at it down here in the bottom right. It says click next to save check numbers, okay? So what happens essentially is when folks are printing their checks, they go, okay, I'm choosing my check layout that I want. I'm going to print checks. They open up the check preview. They send it to their check stock. It prints it, okay? They X out of it. They X out of the actual preview of the checks. And then they simply use the X in the upper right corner here and close out of the check printing. That's the problem, okay? You cannot just simply close out of the check printing screen. You must click next in order to get to the window that says, did the checks mark the checks as printed or printed right here. When I go to next and I skip over this, I don't need to print checks. I don't need to do anything else. I go to next. You have to get to this mark as printed screen, okay? When you actually physically send the checks to your printer, it triggers this to check this box automatically, okay? But all you have to do is close out of the preview of the checks, simply click next, make sure mark as printed is checked, then click next and finish, okay? You cannot use the X to close out of it because until you get to this window, check the mark as printed box, payroll does not see the check numbers as having been assigned, okay? And so this is the step that folks are missing. So now that I've got these, the check numbers are now properly assigned. I've got them now marked as printed. I'm going to click Next and Finish. Okay. Now when I go back to Transfer to Accounting, I have my direct deposit employees, but here are the rest of my employees now. Okay. So now I can now safely transfer all 9 or 10 of my employees into accounting like I would normally, and I would transfer them in because the check numbers are now assigned. So if I now click yes on the print of the transfer audit report and print, opens up the preview of the report. Yes, I've got my direct deposit employees, but we notice that for our employees, there are check numbers now correctly and properly assigned. Again, we cannot, for employees that receive checks, it doesn't matter whether they're computer prepared, folks, or you handwrite the checks, but the payroll cannot be transferred into accounting for those who receive checks without check numbers being assigned. Okay? So yeah, please pay attention to that. When you close out of the preview of the checks themselves after they've printed, you go, yep, the check's printed great, go to Next. Don't even look at that red X in the upper right, just simply click Next, make sure Mark is printed is checked, click Next and Finish, and it then allows you to transfer it into accounting. Okay, so that, folks, is, with about another minute left, is a kind of a quick examination of why we're commonly seeing or getting questions from folks asking why payroll has not been transferred into accounting. But those two reasons alone, incomplete accounts and check numbers not being properly assigned, are the two main reasons why payroll will not or has not been transferred into accounting, even though you may be getting advised when you log in that they are, for whatever reason. Okay? So if you have questions, please let us know. So right there, folks, I'm going to leave today's topic there for today.